Imagine ancient Europe, not just isolated little villages, but this vibrant, buzzing network. Think trade routes crisscrossing the continent, connecting people, ideas, goods. Now picture the powerful people back then, the elites. Where do you think they came from? Their hometown, right? Born and bred locally. Well, what if I told you that some cutting-edge science is showing something? Well, something completely different about some key Bronze Age leaders. It really challenges that whole idea. Today, we're doing a deep dive into Seddin in Germany. It's known as this real powerhouse from the late Bronze Age, maybe around 900 to 700 BCE. We're talking huge burial mounds like the famous King's Grave, the Grab, and another big one, Wickbold of the Thirst. And archaeologists already knew these places were packed with amazing stuff: bronze swords, fancy pottery, clear signs of trade reaching far and wide. But here's the thing, the mystery that lingered was, okay, goods were moving, we see that, but were people moving? Or was it just objects getting passed along? It was a real gap in our knowledge. How much were people actually traveling back then? But now there's this fantastic new study just out in PLOS1 led by Dr. Anja Frank. And they use this really, really clever method, bioarchaeology. Looking at human bones, they've found a way to figure out where someone grew up, even thousands of years later. And get this, even from cremated remains. And the big reveal, the core of what we're digging into today, it's genuinely astonishing. This new science shows that a whole bunch of the elites buried in Seddin, they weren't local at all. They were basically like ancient foreign travelers, people who grew up way far away from where they ended up being powerful. So our mission today for you is this. We're going to unpack how scientists figured this out. We'll explore where these Bronze Age jet-setters might have actually come from. And crucially, what does this bombshell finding mean for how we understand connection, power, even identity way back in Bronze Age Europe? It might just change how you picture the past.
That's exactly right. Seddin's always been on the radar because the evidence for connections was just, well, it was everywhere, even before the study. The existing archaeology painted this picture of a really important hub, that Grab you mentioned, the King's Grave from the 9th century BCE. It's massive, like over 60 feet across. And inside this intricate stone chamber, Wickbold I is similarly impressive. And inside these places, yeah, incredible finds. Rich bronze goods, clay artifacts, those amazing swords, decorative axes, fancy pottery. It was already clear Seddin was a major player in international networks during the late Bronze Age, say 11th to 8th centuries BCE.
So it wasn't just stuff made nearby. The artifacts themselves hinted at a much wider world.
Oh, absolutely. The grave goods show clear links to the Nordic Bronze Age. That's like Sweden, Denmark, northern Germany, the Netherlands, a huge cultural area. But it went even further. Take a knife found in Wickbold. It looks almost identical to ones found over in Denmark. And then there's this really unique filera from the Königsklapp.
Filera, what's that exactly?
It's a kind of decorative bronze disc. Think military decoration or maybe a status symbol. And this specific type, it's almost exclusively found way down south in the Urnfield culture areas of southern Europe. That's a big deal culturally, and there's more. A bronze amphora, like a big jar from the Königsgrab, its style isn't local. It looks a lot like things found in Veii, a major Etruscan town down in central Italy.
Wow, Italy?
Yeah, although similar things popped up in Jutland and Poland too. But it all points to these really intense trade networks connecting southern Scandinavia, central Europe, and northern Italy. But what's always been fascinating, the big question mark, was whether this flow of goods meant a flow of people. Were individuals actually making these journeys?
Okay, yeah, let's unpack that. Because how on earth do you tell if someone lived somewhere else thousands of years ago? Especially if they were cremated, it sounds impossible. This is where the strontium isotopes come in, right?
Oh, yeah.
The idea being that our bones absorb chemicals from our food and water, reflecting the local geology where we grew up. Is that the gist?
That's precisely it. And the real key, particularly with cremated remains, is a tiny little bone in your inner ear, the petrous bone. It's special because it forms super early, by the time you're maybe 2 years old. And crucially, it doesn't remodel later in life. It doesn't change.
Oh, okay.
So it acts like this amazing little time capsule, locking in the strontium signature of your childhood environment. And it's so dense that even after cremation, which involves incredibly high heat, that signature is largely preserved. It's pretty remarkable. So the first step for the researchers was to figure out the local Seddin signature, the bioavailable reference baseline, they call it. Basically, what did the local strontium flavor look like back then? They analyzed different things from the environment. Interestingly, they used soil from the archaeological layers of the Königsgrab itself and modern surface water samples.
Why not just modern soil or plants? Seems easier.
Well, they found those weren't reliable. Modern soil can be affected by things like natural leaching over centuries or, modern pollution, fertilizers, that kind of thing, anthropogenic contamination. It messes with the ancient signature. But the archaeological soil and the surface water, they gave a much better picture of the ancient local strontium levels. So once you have that local baseline, it's pretty straightforward. You test the strontium in an individual's petrous bone. If it doesn't match the local Seddin signature, bingo, they're non-local. They must have spent those crucial early years somewhere else entirely. And the bigger picture here, this is huge. It lets us track human movement even with cremation, which was so common in the Bronze Age and always made this kind of analysis really difficult before. It's genuinely groundbreaking stuff.
It really is astounding, the precision, pulling such personal history from a tiny ear bone. It's like finding a hidden geological passport, isn't it?
Yeah.
Telling you where their life journey began. Okay, so here's where it gets really wild. The results. After all that careful science, what did they find out about the people buried in these fancy Seddin graves?
The results were, frankly, staggering. They looked at 22 individuals from 5 of these elite burial sites: Wickbold I, Reckenthin, Grosslin, Nettelbeck, Ellershagen. And out of those 22 people, an incredible 20 had non-local strontium signatures.
20 out of 22? Seriously?
Seriously. Only 2 individuals clearly matched the local profile for the Prignitz region around Seddin.
Wow, so like 90% weren't originally from...
Exactly. A huge majority of the people buried in these high-status monumental graves were not local in terms of their childhood origins, and that has massive implications. It points towards really complex mobility patterns, as the study says, high levels of individual movement, especially among the elite. They were careful, too, combining the isotope data with anthropological analysis, especially where remains were fragmented. Like at Nettelbeck, they realized some fragments thought to be one person were actually multiple individuals. But the main finding holds strong. These are elite burials, big mounds, rich grave goods, signifying power and status. So it really raises that fundamental question. What does it mean for a community when its most powerful members, its leaders, overwhelmingly grew up somewhere else? It kind of turns our usual assumptions about ancient power on their head.
It really does. That's a profound question. So, okay, if they weren't from Seddin originally, where did they come from? Did the strontium signatures give clues about their actual childhood homes?
Yes, the signatures act like a geographical filter, narrowing down the possibilities. First, they could rule out places with similar strontium values to Seddin, so mainland Denmark, the North German plains, the Polish lowlands. Probably not the origin points for these individuals.
Okay, so where did match?
The matching regions were pretty diverse, actually, suggesting people weren't all coming from just one place. Several candidates emerged in Central Europe, places like the Harz Mountains in Germany, the Erzgebirge or Fichtelgebirge Mountains on the German-Czech border, Lusatia, which spans Germany and Poland, and Bohemia in the western Czech Republic. Bohemia looked like a particularly strong possibility, partly because it's well connected to Seddin via the Elbe River, a natural highway back then.
Makes sense.
But it wasn't just Central Europe. Some signatures pointed further south, towards mountainous areas in northern Italy, north of the Po Valley.
Italy again.
Exactly. And the fact that you have these different signatures pointing to Bohemia, maybe the Harz, maybe northern Italy, it strongly suggests these elites originated from more than one region. It wasn't a single migration wave, but a more complex mix. And what's really neat is how this scientific data starts to align with the archaeology we already had. Remember those foreign grave goods, like a specific type of rib needle from Nettelbeck that looks southern German, or a Lusatian-style pot from Reckenthin? Well, the study notes these finds fit rather well with some of the non-local signatures they found.
Ah, so the objects in the bones are telling a similar story of connection.
Precisely. The science is adding this incredible layer of direct human movement onto the trade routes and cultural links we'd previously only guessed at from the artifacts. It's connecting the dots in a whole new way.
That's fantastic. Okay, so this incredibly high level of mobility, 20 out of 22 elites not being local. What does this really mean for how we think about Bronze Age society? It's got to challenge some old ideas, right?
Oh, absolutely. Profoundly. This percentage of non-locals is unusually high compared to other similar studies in Bronze Age Northern Europe. You look at sites like Simmers II in Sweden, or Volmarshausen in Germany, Schnildgården in Denmark, or even broader studies across Denmark. They typically find maybe 20%, 30% non-locals.
So Seddin is way off the charts comparatively.
Way off the charts for the elite group they studied, yes. It makes this Seddin elite seem really exceptional. It forces us to reconsider. The traditional picture is often of Bronze Age elites being deeply tied to their ancestral land, power flowing from that connection. This Seddin evidence complicates that picture significantly.
So why? Why were these elites seemingly so mobile? Did the study offer reasons why they might have ended up being buried with such high status in Seddon despite growing up elsewhere?
The study itself doesn't lock down one single answer, which is fair, it's complex. But it opens up some really interesting possibilities. One idea is that these were genuine migrants, people who moved to Seddon later in life. Maybe through marriage alliances between powerful families across different regions. That was common later in history.
Diplomatic marriages, yeah.
Or maybe they were successful warriors, traders, perhaps even influential religious figures who gained their status and power through their actions or connections, rather than just by birthright in Seddon. They might have been integrated into the local elite structure. Another possibility, quite different, is that they were considered local in terms of family or affiliation, but they were actually raised somewhere else during childhood.
Like fostering.
Exactly. Maybe sent away to another important center for training, education, or as part of an alliance-building practice, like a Bronze Age version of sending your kids to a prestigious boarding school or a diplomatic exchange.
Huh. So they'd return as adults with outside experience and connections, but their bones would reflect where they grew up.
Precisely. Their strontium signature would be non-local, even if they spent their adult life and died in Seddon. And there's a third, maybe more speculative idea. Could some of these have been special ceremonial graves? Maybe for individuals who weren't part of the everyday local scene but held some unique ritual importance, or symbolized ties to distant, powerful places? It's less likely to explain such a high percentage, but it reminds us burial isn't always straightforward.
It's fascinating because each scenario paints such a different picture of power and community. Migrants gaining status suggests a potentially quite open society, at least at the elite level. Fostering suggests incredibly sophisticated long-distance networks for diplomacy and training. It definitely pushes back against any image of isolated, static communities.
Absolutely. If we zoom out, what this discovery really underscores is the incredible fluidity and interconnectedness of the elite network stretching across Bronze Age Europe. It suggests a dynamism, a constant movement and exchange among the powerful that maybe we haven't fully appreciated just by looking at stationary archaeological sites or assuming power was purely local and inherited. You see a picture of a very proactive, strategically connected elite, possibly using these distant ties for trade advantages, military alliances, prestige, all sorts of reasons. Now, it is important, as you mentioned, to remember the study's focus. It looked at these very rich burials.
Of the elite.
Yes. So as the paper acknowledges, this finding is likely due to an underrepresentation of the general population. We don't know if your average farmer in Seddin was also moving around this much. Probably not to the same extent. But even understanding this just about the elite is transformative. It forces us to ask completely new questions about how these societies were structured, how power was negotiated, how alliances were formed, and how these wide-ranging connections shape the culture of the time. It makes the whole concept of local identity much more complicated and interesting.
That's a really vital point. It's a specific window, but a window that dramatically changes the view. It moves us from thinking about static communities to this incredibly vibrant, interlinked world, at least for those at the top. So many new questions. It's just amazing how science keeps letting us refine and sometimes completely overhaul our understanding of the past. Well, this deep dive into Seddon's Bronze Age elites has certainly taken us on quite a journey, from digging into the science of tiny ear bones to mapping out these incredible ancient travel routes. We've really seen how cutting-edge bioarchaeology is rewriting the story of human movement and maybe even the nature of power itself thousands of years ago. So here's something to chew on. If the most powerful people, the influential elites in a major Bronze Age center like Seddon, were in fact overwhelmingly people who grew up far away, what does that actually tell us about power back then? Was it less about where you were born and more about the connections you built, the influence you gained across regions? What kind of society thrives when its leaders are effectively international figures with broad perspectives and ties? And maybe the biggest question, how many other places throughout history are just waiting for their own deep dive, waiting for science to uncover similar hidden stories that challenge everything we thought we knew about who they were and where they came from?